Monday mornings with Matt and Kevin. What's in the news? Topics that come up around the dinner table will be given the truth treatment with no punches held and no falsehood left standing. These two will debate real-life issues from a Catholic perspective every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern.
And now, here are your hosts, Matt and Kevin.
We are back Monday mornings with Monday morning. I hate Monday mornings. Do you, Anna? I just blew my guess already. Anna, do you like Monday mornings? Do you like mornings in general?
No, I'm not a morning person. I'm a night owl. So it could be Monday morning, Tuesday morning, you name it. I just generally am not a morning person.
It's awful. Same with me. So I hate mornings. I don't like Mondays, and we have a show called Monday Mornings with Matt and Kevin. Anyway, welcome into Mornings with Matt and Kevin here on the Catholic Family Podcast. So Kevin is away for the week, but I am thrilled to have the guest that I do have with me today. She is really a leader in the pro-life movement and has done an incredible amount of work for the March of Life, and is here to kind of talk with us today about the issue of our day, really one of the major issues of our day, abortion and the fight for unborn life. And I was telling her before we kind of started, social media has been such a great tool for me, and I'm sure for other people too, who they're just able to connect with people from all around the world, different walks of life and different experiences, and just kind of come together and get in touch with each other and just be able to meet and have these conversations. So Anna Lulis is with us today to talk about that. And so Anna, welcome to the show. I'm really glad, really glad that I was able to get you and you're able to join me today for this show. So
Yeah,
welcome.
thanks for
Welcome.
having me. I'm excited to dive into the specifics of Catholicism, pro-life movement, everything. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So yeah, really quick, like we were saying earlier, you kind of said that you were pro-life really for your whole life, right? You kind of knew that this was something that you espoused as an individual, and you made your journey religiously too through agnosticism for a lot of your life, maybe 19 or so years, I think I heard you say before. And you went through Protestantism and then converted to the Catholic faith. But what was it about the pro-life movement or the pro-life cause that you actually said, okay, this isn't just something that is important to me or I want to fight about, but actually make it something that I spend my time doing? What was it that really made you want to dedicate yourself, and how did you even do that? How does somebody get involved to the extent that you are? So maybe share your story a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, long story short, God, which sounds cliche, but it's true. I did not actually think I was going to be in the pro-life movement full time. If you told me this in
Mm,
college, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I was always pro-life, like you mentioned, just due to the scientific proofs. I was super secular growing up, though, so I was fairly progressive on most social issues, but the life issue. I just didn't necessarily have a why, just because when you're agnostic, your moral framework is doesn't necessarily make sense. If you try to explain or justify anything, you're just being logically inconsistent at that point. And I think deep down I recognize that. So I didn't necessarily have a good why for why I should care about human life, even though I scientifically knew and recognized that human life begins at fertilization. Therefore, human rights begin at that point. And I was super justice driven. I think I've always been that way. I was like I hate using this word, but a social justice warrior. And now I like to
mm,
say that, but Catholic, which is funny how God can kind of use your personality and flip it for good. But yeah, I was always pro-life. And then I had this crazy conversion to just mere Christianity. I didn't really understand the differences between Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism. I just knew I basically picked up the Bible and read a verse and had an instantaneous conversion. And I knew the God from this book is God, and I just wanted to learn more about him. So I ended up going to Liberty University. I transferred there my sophomore year, and I dove into my faith. That was my main objective, is figuring out who this God in this book was. And I ended up helping start the Catholic Campus Ministry at Liberty University, which is one of the biggest
mm.
Protestant schools in America. So that was an interesting challenge in and of itself, but it kind of exploded, I would say. And the pro life group on campus was very small. And they were a little confused as to how that happened. So they came on over and kind of asked me if I could help do that with their group. And now I have this why I should care about human life. And Yeah, I saw that it needed help, so I was like, Might as well. Why not? Like, this should be the biggest group on campus, in my personal opinion." So yeah, it exploded in a semester. There might have been some issues with admin, and I don't know, like to say I'm a fighter. I've just always been that way, so I don't really take no for an answer. So
Mm.
I was like, if I'm gonna make this big, it's gonna go big. We're gonna go to the March for Life. We're gonna change some policies. We're gonna go protest some stuff. And the president of Students for Life at the time, because that was the group we were associated with or got an association with, she just like kind of heard about me and told me I was going to work for her. So
Oh,
I didn't necessarily
oh,
have a choice. I was
that's
studying.
good.
So when I say it was like God, quite literally was God, because I mentioned of actually working full time in the pro life movement. I thought maybe once I
Mm.
graduated, I was studying computational sciences and business, which a lot of people don't know about me. But I
Oh,
was like,
okay.
expecting to probably go into corporate America, IT stuff, but my passion was really in just, like, human rights, fighting justices which I hate when people say that sounds progressive, but it's really not. Like, I think that's actually very explicitly Catholic, and we need kind of more of that. But, yeah, so I was basically told I was gonna do it full time, and I loved it. So I was like, sure, this is something I love to do. I thought I was going to actually go and major in theology after school,
Hmm.
at some maybe Catholic institution. But I ended up God had different plans, I'll just say. And I dove into the pro life movement, and I've been in the pro life movement ever since, working with various different organizations. I like to say, like I do a lot of independent work on my own. Yeah, and I love it. So I've been in it for a little over 4 years at this point.
And then, it's interesting you made a point is that you knew the science of it before you kind of even realized, and that's the thing that I think is missed so often. And really I've mocked and made fun of, which deserves being mocked and made fun of, is that the so-called pro-science crowd ignores some very, 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 if I haven't made that word clear, very basic science of there's no denying that human life begins at conception. There's no way outside of that. And if you avoid that very simple fact, you're just blind. I don't even think you're naive. You're refusing to see a very, very basic scientific truth. So you allowed that to kind of catapult your way into be like into saying like, oh, this is a human justice issue. This is a human rights issue that these unborn babies from their conception have the right to their own lives, and that what is human now was always human. And I like how that kind of catapulted you into your journey here. So let me kind of fast forward a little bit to when Roe v. Wade. You said you were we talked before the show. You were actually at the Supreme Court. Now, I watched videos of that, and of course, there were some protests of people making all sorts of noises and whatever else those demonically, I'll behave, whatever those lovely people do. They
Demonic is
were
actually how I describe it, so
screeching
that's not
and
going far
and
at all.
just and just letting out all sorts of noises. How did you react to that moment? Because I know it was, people have prayed for that day. What, for 50 years, right? To see in America where Roe v. Wade was no longer the law of the land. Did you what kind of how did you perceive that victory? Was it a huge milestone to you? Was it step one? How do you, as somebody who's been on in this movement with feet on the ground, view that Supreme Court ruling?
It was monumental. It was definitely a win for the pro-life movement for life, but it is just the beginning. I think a lot of people may have falsely assumed that was the end goal, but it's not.
Yes. Yes.
It was that is just the first step for us to be allowed to make abortion unthinkable within this country, to ultimately abolish abortion. And we need to get rid of Roe v. Wade in order for us to do that, for us to really fight the fight. And thankfully and fortunately, the Supreme Court allowed us to do so. So it wasn't just a pack up everything and go back home. We did our work. It was like, no, now is actually when we need to get boots on the ground and start fighting this issue very, very aggressively, not just in this like very soft approach, maybe, or some people like to say we need just more compassion within the pro-life movement, and it exists. That is what the pro-life movement is we are compassionate, but we also need to fight this issue incredibly super aggressively, because that is exactly what the opposition
Mm.
has done,
Yes.
and people
Yes.
quite
I agree.
literally are dying. They're getting poisoned or dismembered. It's not just an issue you can sit back and kind of be indifferent about. So I would say it's just the beginning, and people have recognized that within the pro-life movement. I just hope the people who are just generically pro-life also recognize that and kind of get involved within their local community to make abortion unthinkable.
I don't know, Anna, but I met Gianna Jessen, if that name sounds familiar to you. She's a pro life speaker. No, you're shaking your head like, really? I'm shocked. So she's a pro life speaker. She survived a saline abortion, and her abortionist signed her birth certificate. So her story is fascinating. I actually got to meet her when she was giving some tours, but you can go on YouTube and search her name and see some of her speeches. She survived her abortion. So you said something about people are really affected here, and she's disabled because of it, and that to me just shows the humanity of the baby. This is a woman who I'm not sure how old she is now. I don't want to guess as to maybe not insult her, but she survived this attempt on her life while she was still in her mother's womb, and she suffers the effects of it today. Very, very sad story, but very, very powerful and moving story that we have these real life examples of people who were considered that quote unquote choice at some point, and now they're here and they're among us. And so, I guess my follow up question for you, Anna, with this is the numbers don't lie. I think they put out maybe 70,000 or something like lives were saved because maybe you know it better than I do, but since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, how many unborn babies were actually saved because of that? It's quite high.
Yeah, it's close to 90 at this point,
Okay.
and it could be higher just because a lot of these testing or studies actually happen in the past, right? So when reports
Mm.
are released or numbers are released, you expect it to be a little higher than what they report. But yeah, it's almost 90,000. So it actually affects so many lives. Pro-life laws, ironically, work. They actually save lives, which is why it's incredibly important, like I mentioned prior, to get within your community and start talking about this issue. It is a difficult issue, but it's an issue that needs to be talked about because people are being affected. Not just women, men are being physically and emotionally affected, that and they're not able to have a say just because they've been told by society to kind of not talk. It's a woman's rights when it's really a human right. Like this goes back to human rights. Human rights begin in the womb. Women's rights begin in the womb, and women and men are directly involved. Everybody's involved. Everyone's hurt by
Well, it's
abortion.
interesting. I'm talking to you right now, and I have done a lot of work, and I've prayed outside Planned Parenthood, and I have gone to speeches and all those things. And for the people who make this, this is a woman's issue, this is a woman's issue, this is a woman's issue. Most people are like yourself. I know this is 2024. This is a very, very confusing topic, but you're a woman. And a lot of people who lead that, shocking, but a lot of people who lead this fight are women. And what do you have to say about that? Like, why do you think for an issue that is considered, anti-women and feminist, and why do you think, just in my experience, I don't know the numbers, but a lot of the leaders in the pro-life movement and those who have been very um, deeply involved are women? Do you have anything to say about that? Like, why is there a reason that you might think?
Well, I think it's important for women to be involved, but also think it just shows that the opposition tries to say it's a woman's issue, thinking all women should think this way. And it's powerful to show that almost every single pro-life organization is led by a woman. That is incredibly counter to their narrative. Their narrative is every woman should care about this because your rights are being affected, women are being affected. And for women to stand up and actually say no, not only is it's offensive that you would even group our so-called rights into, or say it's completely, women's rights are dependent on whether or not we have the ability to kill our children, is inhumane and offensive. That degrades us as human beings, the value and what motherhood looks like and the importance of that, children's lives, what about children's rights? I think it goes back there's a larger conversation that needs to be had as to why they've picked that narrative. I
Mm,
think it backfired by having all of these women lead pro-life organizations. That being said, I still think a man's voice is needed. A lot of things only change when men step up and say, "Hey, this isn't going to happen anymore," just due to the nature of men. Men and women are different. We're complementary, which is a beautiful thing, and it's okay for men and women to be different. So it can't just be female based. However, I do think that's a powerful thing to see. It's very symbolic to have female spokespeople, especially leaders, actually lead massive organizations, but you also need men to come alongside and start their own organizations and actually be present and be there and know that they have just as much of as a voice as women in this conversation, because it takes two to tango, and men for too long have been suffering in silence. And I know there are a lot of men's groups where men can go if they're post abortive, or have any experience with abortion, to kind of talk about the trauma that they've even experienced through that and how they felt like they really couldn't protect their child. And instinctually, men
yep.
are protectors and providers. And so that just deeply harms them in the long run. So,
And I think too, and I think a lot of men are afraid to have a say. I think that they have been told, that this is a woman's issue and that you don't have a voice in this fight. And so now they're afraid to do so. And I think a lot of men have almost been bullied into keeping their mouths shut, which no good man of virtue could do. Men are called to protect women. Men are called to protect children. We need to raise our voice. We need to be a voice in this movement. But so many men have just been bullied into, you need to shut up. This is a woman's issue. This is between her and her doctor. You have no say in this. And a lot of guys, they're just so passive, where they go, you know what? Maybe I'm personally opposed to it, but it's between a woman. They've been programmed to think this way, and that needs to change first and foremost. And I think a lot of the reasons why we see, as you said, a lot of the victories that we've had, and a lot of these moral fights have come from men, because men are called to this type of leadership, which is a different role than women. So, kind of bringing that into politics just a little bit. I know that in this election cycle, we're only down to two candidates: the unstoppable Nikki Haley, who's just to kind of go off track here. For a woman, I don't know, maybe you like her a little bit, but for a woman who lectures us about how to win and how to win elections, would go 0 and 50 if she stayed in it. Like, literally, like, that's not an exaggeration. She will go 0 and 50 if she stays in. But anyway, so between her and Trump, I know that, in a typical Republican so-called pro-life primary, you have 10 whatever candidates on the stage, and they talk about the issue of abortion. And it always comes up, of course, because the Republican Party is supposed to be that party that speaks out for unborn life. And kind of like I was mentioning to you before the show, and I've said this before in the past as well. When was the last time a candidate didn't beat around the bush when it came to abortion and called it what it truly is: a crime, and ultimately mortal sin? That language is not used. And my first question for you, Anna, would be, is because I know you've kind of, again, you have your feet on the ground and you're in this fight, you're in DC. um, do you hear or see any politicians actually use that type of language? And do you think it should be used? I guess you could say, in our society, should our leaders actually come out and tell people that this is more than just an inconvenience? This is more than just, this is a grave sin against God. And we've lost that aspect of God in our society. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I agree. I think more politicians should do it. Are politicians doing it right now? Absolutely not. I can't remember the last time a politician sincerely stood up and called abortion what it is, which is a crime against humanity, a crime against God. And it's an issue. It involves children being murdered and sacrificed, and that is a mortal sin. It's something that's incredibly grave and a serious issue that we need to be talked that needs to be talked about. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people, even on the Republican side, don't like talking about abortion. It's not a popular subject with them. And I think it's just because politics generally is saturated in immorality. So naturally, abortion's very convenient for people like that, unfortunately. But I do think people need to start saying, calling out what abortion is, like I mentioned. And I do think there is some benefit to people who may not be Catholic speaking out. So if they're secular, and fall on the Republican side or even the Democrat side, calling abortion what it is, maybe not saying I'm against this because I'm a religious person and it is a sin against humanity and God, and ultimately God, I should say, but their voice is still needed, and I think it could still be influential. That being said, if you are Catholic and you are or Protestant or Orthodox, Christian in general, and you are in politics, I do think there is a need to be very firm and precise with your words so that people within the Christian community understand the gravity of abortion and the extremism of it. Without that type of language, I think sometimes people within the Christian community cannot understand or see the importance of speaking out. They'll equate it to something like immigration or fiscal policies, but this is an issue that actually directly decides and determines if somebody can live or die and allow an act that's very brutal and it attacks the most vulnerable within our society, and you can either be poisoned by it or have somebody be completely dismembered. So it's not a light issue. It's not something you can just equate to immigration or fiscal policies. It's something that should be the most important issue within our society, but it's unfortunately not being prioritized within the Republican Party specifically right now.
And it's not popular at all. If they have these debates where the little ticker is at the bottom, where like, do people approve you, and it goes up, and then if they disapprove of what you're saying, it kind of goes down. And I remember even watching. I think it should have been maybe Mike Pence and um, who would it have been? Biden, maybe. But just when they were debating, that ticker did very well for Mike Pence until he got to the topic of abortion, and he expressed his views on the subject, and that ticker went down. And I believe the majority of Americans, when asked, overturning Roe v. Wade is very unpopular. I don't think it's not polling wise, it's not a winning issue. I don't think it does well when it's actually put to the test. But I do think the majority of Americans do want some restrictions. But when it's polled as to just complete ban, I don't think that sits well with a lot of people. So I guess my last question for you today, before we wrap the show up a little bit, is what would your message be to people who want to get involved, because this is an issue that is important to them? Do they have to move to DC? Do they have to? Because I think you said you had a background in social media a little bit too, right? And coordinating things with through online efforts. How does somebody start to take kind of the path that you took to really get involved and to really help win this? Because we need to get involved. I don't think a lot of it is going to come from the government. We need to put our effort in to help engage in this fight. So what do you think is a good step or two for people to take who want to get more involved and to uh, help help win this war?
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to get involved. Could I touch on the
You can
winning
touch on whatever
issue?
you'd like. Go ahead. Go for it.
Awesome.
You're killing
I
it.
just I just wanna just because it's so important to say that, I would say the life issue is a winning issue. It's not a losing issue. It's only a losing issue right now because it's been ineffectively communicated to the broader public. So the lack of education when it comes to fetal development is significant. It's
Hmm.
honestly it it's an evil in and of itself. Like, we are not properly educated on fetal development when human life begins, but I also think we have a mental health crisis right now, and some people do recognize when human life begins, but they don't even value their own life, so how are they
Hmm.
supposed to value
Very
the
true.
most vulnerable in the womb? So I think it is a winning issue in the sense of if we're able to properly educate and have a good narrative that we combat with the pro-abortion side on and call abortion what it is, expose the reality of abortion, talk about fetal development because a lot of studies have shown that the more people are educated about fetal development, the more likely they are to be for restrictions
Hmm.
on abortion, which is why polls have come out and said, oh, the majority of Americans actually don't like the reversal of Roe v. Wade. But when you get into the specifics on restrictions, most people are actually for the reversal of Roe v. Wade if you look at their belief system in terms of where they support restrictions on, because Roe v. Wade was a super radical as to when they permitted abortion. And once people recognize that and know that, they're like, oh, actually, maybe the reversal of Roe v. Wade was a good thing because it was too extreme. It
Hmm.
allowed for abortion for like very, very late in a pregnancy. And that's not what the majority of Americans support. So bringing it back to the states is a battle in and of itself. Hopefully, we're able to get it back on the federal level, and I think abortion should be abolished within our lifetime. But that's only going to happen is if we properly communicate this and teach people how to think about this issue. And I don't think people have been taught how to think or even know human development in general. And then on top of that, there's a huge mental health crisis that we also need to prioritize. So I would say it's a winning issue. And most people would support the reversal of Roe v. Wade if they knew the specifics of what Roe v. Wade allowed. And
Hmm.
then I can touch
I,
on how people
I
get
agree.
involved. Yeah, how people can get involved is I I went into it not thinking about, like, if I'm gonna get a job and work full time in the movement. I just saw there being a need, and I was like, "Somebody needs to do something because I feel like nobody's doing anything." And I the way I got involved initially was literally just helping out a group on campus, a pro-life group, and that does a lot more than you think. That's why I'm very pro people getting involved on the local level.
Right.
Just start local, even if you feel like it's not doing anything. Ultimately, it is. You're one person, just influencing one person can do so much for the movement. So get involved locally. Whether if you're in school, join a group. That's like the least you can do. Stand outside abortion facilities. I know that's incredibly effective. Most people, studies have shown that the more people outside of abortion facilities, the more likely women are to cancel their appointments for abortions, even if we don't see it. So I think a lot of this goes back to doing it no matter what, even if you see the results of it. And it might seem small, but it's really not in the long run. And that could ultimately lead to, if you get involved on the local level and you want to do more, there are opportunities to expand to the state level, to the federal level, getting involved in national organizations like going to State March for Life or the National March for Life. Those are easy ways to just stand for life. And even if it seems small, it's really not. It can do so much. And hopefully, maybe one day, if God calls you into the movement full time, a lot of those opportunities will just pop up naturally.
That's great, and I agree, and especially too, especially during this time of Lent, dedicating those rosaries to Our Lady, who is patron of the unborn, to provide us with this grace to really, and I pray this a lot, just to have people see the reality of abortion. May these hearts be softened, and may their consciences be touched by the beautiful hands of Our Lady, mediatrix of all graces, to to help us win this fight. And we know that she stands with us. We know that she um, fights this fight with us, and that Roe v. Wade being overturned, in my opinion anyway, was a beautiful gift to her. We need to do more. And we will do more. So, Anna, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your expertise, your experience, your knowledge, and just sharing kind of your story too. Um, just with this issue of our day and time that is really put a very, very, very dark cloud over our country. But hopefully, our generation here could have a voice of our own and win this fight. And I do agree with you that when you really look at it and you really communicate it clearly, I refuse to believe that life is a losing issue.
Mm.
And so we will win this fight, and much to be done. But thank you for coming on, Anna. And again, like I said, for sharing all your expertise and your knowledge. It was very fun chatting with you. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Make the world Catholic again.